welcome back to our online course, Building Cost Estimation Simplified. In today's video lesson, we will be learning about analysis of rates. In our previous video lesson, we had learned how to quantify materials from the drawings. And what we did was we calculated the cost of these items by multiplying the quantities from the drawings, the quantities that we got from the drawings, with the unit rate of these quantities to find the final cost. Now, where did we get the rate of items? We have handbooks which are prepared by the government, prepared and published, and we get these values of the rate of items from schedule of rates, and we could just use them for finding the cost of an item. Now, what happens when such schedule of rates does not exist? Or what happens when we have a particularly complex kind of work which requires very unique specifications, and where we have to find the cost of the work by working out the actual processes that are involved. In such circumstances, we use the process of analysis of rates to find out the cost of doing a particular work, or finding the cost of materials and the processes. So in this video lesson, we will be going through the process of analyzing the rates. First of all, we will look at the lesson objectives. In this video lesson, we will familiarize ourselves with the analysis of rates. Now, what is analysis of rates? The determination of rate per unit of a particular item of work is called analysis of rates. For this, we require the cost of materials, the cost of laborers, and other expenses involved in the completion of a particular work. Now, for the purpose of rate analysis, the following details are needed. Now, what are they? First of all, what are the operations involved in carrying out the work? So, for example, if it is an excavation work, we need to know what are the different processes about excavation, how deep it has to go, how many laborers are involved. So, there should be a knowledge of the operations involved in carrying out the work, any work. What are the quantities of material required? That's the next question we need answer to find the analysis of rates. Now, the quantities of materials, we can get them readily from the bill of quantities, or we can get them from the measurement drawings, from the takeoff drawings. So that's how we get the quantity of materials required. The next is, what is the cost of these materials? And this can be we can get this from schedule of rates, or we can get from market survey, we can get it from the contractors. There could be a standard list published by the government from time to time. So whichever means we take, it is important to find the cost of these materials. What are the charges for hiring of tools and machineries used in the work? So when we are in a construction, on a construction project, there are different types of tools and machineries used. We would be using a forklift, we might use a tower crane, we might use a bobcat. Whatever the equipments we may use in that project, we could either be hiring them, or it could be our own when we look at it from the contractor's point of view. So we need to know what are the charges for hiring of tools and machineries, because this will have an impact on the total cost of the project. The next is, what are the different categories of workers, crew that is needed? So in a particular job, we might need different kinds of workers, different categories of workers. We might need skilled laborers. We might also need unskilled laborers. And more often than not, any job on a construction site would require a crew rather than an individual. And so we need to understand what are the different labor categories that are involved in a particular work or on a particular job. Now, the next the aspect that we need to know is what are the supervision charges. As we know, there would be a supervisor who would be overseeing a crew, and there would be a site supervisor So, what are the charges for this supervision? That is an important aspect that we need to know. What is the labor output? We will be discussing that later in the video lesson. And what are the wages per day for different workers? It would be different for skilled laborers when compared to unskilled laborers. It would be different for carpenters, for masons. So we need to know what are the wages per day for different workers. Usually, these are published by the government in standard form, and it can vary from location to location, cities to cities, depending on the availability of the laborers, the level of skill that the workers have, etc. So this is also an important aspect that we need when we are doing the analysis of rates. The next is, what is the contractor profit or overhead expenses that are added? Even though the main chunk of the cost is attributed to material, labor, and equipment costs, there is the aspect of contractor's profit and also overhead expenses that need to be added to get the final cost estimation. And so we also need to know what this particular factor would be. Now, as we can glean from these, the job of an estimation, the person who does an estimate, or for the purpose of analysis, it is very important to have an experience of actually what is happening on the site, a knowledge of construction practices, experience of practical work is very important to do a thorough analysis of rates. Now, the rates of a particular item of work depends on a few factors. First of all, specification of works and materials, quality of materials, proportion of mortar, methods of construction, etc. So, the quality of material that we need, the grade of cement that we need. So, all these, the specification of the material and also the workmanship has a big impact on the cost of the particular project. Now, quantities of materials and their rates, number of different types of laborers and their wages. Again, material and labor are being classified, and the rates of particular item of work depends on these factors. Location of the site of work and its distances from the sources of materials, transportation charges, availability of water. These are also factors that affect the rate of a particular item of work. The profits and overhead expenses of the contractor, that is to be added to find the total cost. Usually a profit of 10%, unless otherwise specified, for the contractor is allowed on all items arranged by the contractor. Now 10% is a usual practice or a general percentage that we take, and it could be anything from 10% to 18%. And for smaller and for projects with high specifications, or especially hospitality projects, etc., the profit and the workmanship goes up, and usually the profit can be even more than the 10%. It could be varying. It would be varying from project to project, but usually something like 9 to 18% is something that we can take into consideration for arriving at the total cost of a project. Now, the main cost categories which contribute to the cost of a project are labor, material, and equipment. Some item could be just labor only, some material only. Like for example, for concrete, when we have to lay concrete, it requires labor to place the concrete. It would require material and also the equipment to pump the concrete into place. Some items like special inspections, etc., may not really fit into any of these categories of labor, material, and equipment, and these could be considered as extra. Then there are categories like the services, which would be quoted separately, especially if it is done by subcontractors, or if there is a thumb rule amount that is quoted, which is a percentage of the total cost. That's the way we account for the services like plumbing, electrical services, etc. and it depends on the complexity of the estimate. The labor, material and equipment are the primary categories which accounts for most of the cost of a project. Now let us look at the main categories closer. First of all, we will look at the labor cost. Labor is a cost to install any item. Labor cost is the cost to install any item or perform a task based on hourly rate and productivity per hour. Let me repeat that. Labor cost is the cost to install any item or perform a task based on hourly rate and productivity per hour. So these are two factors that will affect the labor cost, which is the hourly rate and productivity per hour. The rate would be some hourly rate, and it could also be, when we look at the labor wages, we look at daily wages, and this is the definition of labor cost. Now let's look at productivity. Productivity is the amount of units that can be produced in a specific measurement of time. The capacity of doing work by a worker is calculated as total work output per day. It is called as task work or outturn of labor. Now, while we have different personnel working on a project, both at the project site as well as people working in the main office far from the project site, when we refer to labor cost, we are actually referring to the actual manpower on the job site. The other one, the people sitting in the office who also contribute to the project, they are accounted for under overhead costs, and so this has to be borne in mind while preparing an estimate. Now, how do we estimate labor costs? Estimating labor cost for a particular item of work on site. Example, to cast a slab or to do the brickwork of a wall. The labor cost is derived from hourly rates, crew sizes, and productivity per hour. For example, if a carpenter can frame a wooden partition wall of 150 square feet in 8 hours and he charges an hourly charge of rupees 50, then the unit cost of labor would be, we look at the per day wages, and to find the per day wages, we have the hourly wage as rupees 50, and we multiply it to the total working hours in a day, and that is 8 working hours per day. And so we multiply rupees 50 into 8, so that is rupees 400 per day. The unit cost of labor for framing a wooden partition wall would be per day charge divided by the area of the work. So we get 400 divided by 150. It was already given that the area of the wall is 150 square feet. And when we divide the per day wages by the area of the work, we have rupees 2.67 per square feet. Another important aspect of calculation of labor cost is to understand the categories of labor. So we have Mistri, the head mason, who is paid rupees 425 per day. The mason has a daily charge of rupees 400 per day. Mazdoor, the beldar, has rupees 250 per day. Phishti, waterman, the wages are rupees 230 per day. And laborer, rupees 230 per day. Carpenter, rupees 400 per day. The blacksmith, rupees 375 per day. And the painter, rupees 375 per day. Each of these categories have different rates per day as taken from Schedule of Rates, and this is from a 2016 rate list. And we know that these are the Indian terminologies, different categories of labor, and correspondingly in English terminologies, the English terminologies for these would be journeyman, laborers, foreman, etc. Estimating labor costs. Usually a work requires a crew to complete it, and therefore the entire team is accounted to find an hourly or daily rate, as the case might be. The National Building Organization gives the following statistics, and we find the calculations for earthwork. For earthwork, quantity of work is 1000 cubic feet. This is an example. And we have the corresponding value in cubic meter. The description of the work. First is excavation in foundation, trenches, etc. in ordinary soil, including disposal up to 30 meters, which is 100 feet, and lift of 1.5 meters, which is 5 feet. And for this, we identify the labor required, 5 beldars, 4 mazdus, to complete the work in a day. Now, refilling excavated earth in foundation, plinth, etc., including consolidation in 15 centimeter layers. And for this activity, the labor required is 3 beldars, 2 mazdus. This is for 1000 cubic feet in a day. So we need 3 beldars and 2 mazdus in a day. The disposal of surplus earth within a lead of 30 meters. The labor required is 1 mazdoor can do 100 cubic feet per day. So since we know the description of work for when we are given the item of description of work of earthwork, we have excavation, refilling, and disposal. And for each activity, we have the labor breakdown as to what are the categories of labor that we need. And since we know the labor cost for each of these labor categories, we can easily find out the cost of earthwork, and this can be incorporated in our estimate. Estimating labor costs. Work crews are of different combinations. For example, in the previous slide, where we saw an example of excavation, we saw that the labor required was 5 beldars, 4 mazdus to complete the work in a day. This comprises of a crew. An example of a 4-man crew would be 1 foreman, 1 journeyman, and 2 laborers. The composition of crew also impacts the cost. For example, it may be more profitable to have 1 mason with multiple laborers than have multiple masons, and this would be especially relevant in the work that involves heavy hauling or moving of heavy objects. Time would be another factor to consider. For example, if it is a fast-track project that has to be completed in a short period of time, we need to employ more laborers, or the man hours will have to be extended. So these will also have cost implication, and this has to be borne in mind when we are doing an estimate. Now, what are the factors affecting the labor costs? Availability of labor. So lack of availability of labor can affect the cost of the project, and the availability of labor is dependent on the kind of area that the project is in, whether it is a rural or urban area, and this can affect the labor costs. The labor wage rates. It varies from cities to cities and state to state, and this will have to be factored in while preparing the estimate. Adverse weather conditions. Now, this is an important factor to be considered. This can affect the labor costs. For example, if there is rain and waterlogging in the site, it can slow down the project considerably, or even if it is just a rainy season, the pace of the project would not be the same as a non-rainy season project. And it's just not about slowing down the project. We also need to give adequate protection against rain. The site can get muddy, and the movement of material and people can get cumbersome and can even slow down the project, and this has to be factored in while preparing the estimate. Now, another factor that affects the labor cost is fast-track projects. There are projects which have to be completed at the shortest time possible because the client wants to move in immediately or there is an urgency. So the fast-track projects are different from the rest of the projects, and this would invariably require more labor employed on site. However, sometimes just increasing the labor may not be the solution, as this could also lead to congestion. So as an alternate, we might have to extend the working hours from 8 hours per day to 10 hours per day, And when we look at some of the studies that have been made, we see that productivity drops with increasing working hours over a week. Now, the next is site constraints. This could be one of the demands made by the contract by the client. Sometimes in projects where there is an already existing office building and where renovation has to take place, sometimes it would only be possible to do it after office hours, or maybe some of the jobs which are quite noisy will have to be avoided during the daytime, because the office is also simultaneously operating. So this can also affect the labor cost and has to be factored in while we are creating the estimate. Cost of material is taken as the cost when the material is delivered on site, and therefore it accounts for transportation charges, local taxes, and other charges. It includes the first cost, which is the cost at the origin, and it also includes the cost of transport, the freight charges, taxes, etc. If the materials are to be carried from a distant place that is more than 8 kilometers, then cost of transportation is to be added. The rates of materials and labor vary from place to place, and therefore rates of different items of work also vary from place to place. Tools and plants, which is another name for machineries and denoted as T&P, are usually based on rentals or cost of machinery. Lump sum amount items are added for miscellaneous or sundry items. So when we are accounting for the tools and plants, the machineries, this will be different from the material cost. We will be charging on the basis of rentals or the cost of the machinery if it is owned by us. And the lump sum amounts are added for miscellaneous or sundry items. Now the material cost factors. First of all, material availability. Material availability is a very important factor when we have material in the market. Sometimes some of the items might be long lead items and will have to be ordered in advance and can impact the duration of the project. The sizing available in the market affects the material cost. Sometimes what a designer prescribes as a customized item may not be available in the market, and to get that in the exact size might increase the cost of the project. And so custom sizes would require special orders and could impact the cost of the project. And so it is always advisable to go for the material sizing as available in the market, which is standardized or modular, which can help in avoiding unnecessary cost increase. Material transportation charges are also also affect the material cost. It's usually taken as the rates delivered at the site of work, and therefore it includes the charges that it incurs for transporting it from the source to the site. And if the distance is more than 8 kilometers, usually a transportation charge is added. Waste factors will also have an implication on the material, and also bear in mind that the impact would be not on the labor cost, because irrespective of the quantity of material that we purchase, the labor cost is always calculated based on the actual quantity of work that is executed. Now, let's look at some of the guidelines while quoting for the materials. First of all, we finalize the quantities of materials from the bill of quantities or the BOQ. We calculate for any waste. We confirm the material sizes desired for installation. We confirm if all materials can be delivered at the same time, or because it has got cost and space implications. Does the price include charges of stocking on site, or will we be stocking it on the site with extra labor? because if we are going to stock on the site with extra labor, then stocking equipment might be needed, and labor charges may also be added to the project cost. Now, the validity of the quote. Suppose the quote for price of the material comes from a supplier. Does that quote have an expiration date? How long is it valid? This will help us to arrange the purchases within a particular stipulated time period. Now, analysis of rate in a very simple manner. Let the cost of the materials for a given unit of work, say 1 cubic meter of work, is A, and say the cost of labor is B. The cost of tools and plants, machineries, is C. The total of material and labor costs would be A plus B plus C. Now we add 1.5% towards charges for adding water, if any, and so that would be 1.5% of A plus B plus C. And add 10% of contractor's profit, which is 10% of A plus B plus C. So the grand total cost would be 1.115 times A plus B plus C. The grand, which is a rate per unit of that particular item, and this would be 1.115 times A plus B plus C, where the A, B and C stand for the cost of materials, labor, tools and plants and machineries. Now, how do we estimate the equipment costs? It depends on the equipment size. We may have to book in advance for getting a particular equipment on the site. And when it comes to tower cranes, factors like what capacity does it lift and how long does it need to be on the site, etc., are crucial to the cost. Mobilization of the equipment. It may be more cost efficient to keep some equipment on site for an extended period of time instead of renting it out intermittently. It would be a good idea to find out the difference between the cost of renting the equipment versus mobilizing the equipment, because in projects for longer duration, it would be viable to purchase an equipment. Of course, this is from the point of view of a contractor, in most of the cases. So, but this has an implication on the equipment cost. The labor costs associated with equipments. It is not enough to just look at the rentals of a particular equipment or the cost of the equipment on the site. Related operators cost. The machineries would require labor operating it. So this will also be this also will have to be factored into the equipment cost. With this, we come to the end of the video lesson on analysis of rates, and we will look at some of the references that we've had. These are some of the study materials we have referred to for this video lesson. Let us recapitulate what we learned today. In this video lesson, we learned about the analysis of rates. We saw the various cost categories like labor, material, and equipment. We also saw the processes of estimating the labor cost, estimating the material cost, and estimating the equipment cost. With this, we come to the end of this video lesson.